Hello, Cliff Stanwyck, Stanwyck Real Estate. Here is part two of Selling Real Estate, What Agents Do. It's a comprehensive series, and today we are going over the California Association of Realtors checklist. I know, exciting stuff, and I'm more than happy to share it with you. And I kind of have two reasons why I'm doing this. One, um, the California Association of Realtors has basically uh, given this checklist, this transactional checklist, to agents. And this is where agents would find it. They would sign in, they would go to their access their realtor's secure transaction. And you can see here there's a legal hotline, all kinds of stuff. We have all the tools to do this job. We're not told to do our job, but there's this awesome checklist that is provided by CAR, California Association of Realtors. And I just want to go over all the things your agent probably should have done. This is servicing your listing before the sale. Personally, I think a lot of these things are a little bit out of order on this list, but other than the first one, which is kind of a catch-all. But let's roll through it. I don't want this to be forever. I have my own process. I will share with you my process for doing it. That is a little bit more, I think, step by step. But let's roll here. So anyway, once the listing agreement is signed, and usually that happens after we have won the listing, this is the catch-all that CAR is telling agents to do. So we should have already delivered a market analysis and other pre-listing activities. We should have asked you and gotten a list for our online marketing and the marketing of the property, features and amenities of the property. We should have already discussed getting the property ready for sale, what you should be doing to get the house ready for sale, and possibly making repairs that will help sell the house. That should have been done, and we have a listing agreement. But now CAR, in their infinite wisdom, is sitting there making sure that we actually have a valid listing agreement here, and we are starting to do our job. So this is essentially all the steps and all the things that should have been done prior to your house going on market. Okay, so let's start. So we should have essentially ordered a property profile, basically gotten information about how the property is held and held by who, whether it's an individual, multiple sellers, whether it's an executor, administrator. If it's in a trust, we should get a copy of the trust document. Don't need a copy of the trust document, but that is something that title's going to need. Probate, sale, and does the seller have the authority to sell? A court order. If there's a power of attorney for the sale, is there a document? A lot of times, if this is a dissolution of marriage or a divorce sale, there's a few moving parts with that, but hopefully we've already done it, right? This is a catch-all form, but as you can see, your agent that you've chosen should have asked all these questions about how the title to sell and what is the reason for selling and who has the authority to sell the house, right? And then you should have a residential listing agreement, and you should have chosen whether it's exclusive, an agency, or an open listing, and hopefully that was explained to you. And if there are multiple sellers, did you get all the signatures on the listing contract? Is the seller signing the listing contract in a representative capacity? Meaning, is it in a trust? And then there's all sorts of forms that go along if it is in a trust. And then there is also, did you give the seller a estimated seller's proceeds? And also, have you essentially ask them to get any loan information available and get a payoff, or we can have the title company. But again, right, these are all the things that this is catching everything. The other thing is did they sign the real estate agency relationships agreement? Also about the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. California does allow agents to represent both buyers and sellers, or the brokerage to represent both buyers and sellers. And then also, did you give the sellers a property transaction booklet and a consumer guide to disclosure requirements for sellers, right? And then, did you have them complete the residential transfer disclosure statement? Okay, that is a mandatory federal form to sell your house. And then it walks through all the questions. Again, this is a catch-all. What you should have asked. Did you talk about the lot size, the square footage? Did you have, where did it come from? Prior appraisal? Did you take it from the county records? From the plans? Where did you get the numbers? And there's a disclosure about that. Property size is a big issue when you're selling a house. If you don't have, where did that number come from? And housing is sold by price per square foot, so it is a big deal. But we'll just keep rolling here. Basically, include a statement to the effect the information has been not been personally verified by the listing broker. Death on the property the last 3 years, flood disaster insurance, Melrose District, seller to request form from local taxing agency, any city county disclosures, any prior inspection reports, any other material facts regarding the property, radon gas, mold problems. If so, use radon gas and mold notice and release agreement, form RGM, industrial use zone, used in the form SSD. And then there's this in big bold print, seller must disclose all material facts. And hopefully, sidebar, that you know what a material fact is, and we will probably have a video on that too. And if seller is providing an TDS, have seller also complete the seller property questionnaire. In the purchase agreement, the SPQ is a requirement. So now we get into, did you get an authorization to put a lockbox on the house, get a key from the seller? Hopefully you discussed all the stuff about, is it going to have a lockbox? Our agents going to show it? What are the showing instructions? Blah, blah, blah. And then, we're getting closer to the house on market here. Install lockbox and place for sale sign on the property. And then it's circling back there and kind of going over the MLS stuff, right? And again, prepare the listing information, check the MLS listing for accuracy. In general, the agent should be giving you that listing to check for accuracy and make sure it's good. If applicable, have the seller complete seller instruction to exclude the listing from the MLS or the internet. I don't know why you would sell your house with an agent if you excluded it from the internet or the MLS, but there are forms for that. Prepared classified ads, brochures, and promotional flyers. Obviously, this thing is not in the recent online phenomenon of home selling. Set up broker's caravan and open house. That's probably another thing we won't get into the weeds on, but that's something that can happen, and there's reasons to do it. And I'm trying not to interject sarcasm today. Anyway, have seller complete the seller affidavit of non-foreign status in California withholding exemption. That's something that can be done by the title company, and I prefer to have it done by the title company because you are providing me your social security number. So I don't necessarily agree with that, but that is something that should have been determined during the listing agreement, is who owns the property and are they a U.S. citizen, and is this house, how is this house being used? Is it as a residence? And again, there's tax implications and the proceeds from the escrow, depending on how the ownership of the resident was used. Was it a primary residence or was it a rental? And then we get into some of the things that should be ready for the house before it goes on market, which are the water heaters brace, and there's a statement of compliance. And also there's a combination statement of water heater and smoke detector statement of compliance. And then and you need to complete the section 2D of the TDS. And then there's smoke detectors, and then there's local laws for compliance, and hopefully you know that, what the rules and regulations are for smoke detectors. And then also, if the property is a single family home or a factory built housing, has the seller complete the water heater and smoke detector statement of compliance, Form WHSD, and completed 2D of the TDS. There's also a lot of local or specialty disclosures that show up, like Megan's Law and a whole bunch of other stuff. There's a form at the end, and I'll go through those as well. So we also have you been given a book of the Combined Hazards book. Includes the Homeowner Guide to Earthquake Safety, Environmental Hazards, a guide for homeowners and buyers, and protect your family from lead in your home. Have them complete the lead-based paint and lead-based hazard disclosure. Acknowledge an addendum for Form FLD. Give seller the Commercial Property Owner's Guide to Earthquake Safety. If property built of cinder blocks or brick construction, and also if it applies in an earthquake zone. But California does have earthquakes. We had one last summer. Tenants, if you have tenants, have we discussed about them remaining on the property? Tenants are a big moving part. Probably another video on that. Tenants in possession. Request a estoppel certificate from tenants. And then again, hopefully we determined this when we were doing the listing, or understood that this was a condition of sale. But is it subject to a 1031 exchange? Meaning, are you going to take it and take the money and it was a rental and you're going to buy another rental? And again, that will impact the proceeds from the sale and the withholding. If, again, when you sell, because hopefully you were given a net sheet and it told you that you're going to be paying California withholding at the sale because it's a rental. Anyway, then we go through and catch up with all the natural hazard information with the property. That can usually be covered off with an NHD report, but hopefully we've either have local knowledge or that we've asked you if the house is in a flood zone, or is it in fair plan? Is it in a state responsibility fire area? Is it in an earthquake thing? Now and actually is the property in a very high fire hazard severity zone? Again, this is hope a lot of the questions on this form are truly a catch up. You know, it's like you've taken this listing, but have you gotten all this information from the seller? Have you done this part of the job? And this is more or less just the pieces that are related to the contractual forms that are going to be in the sale of the property when you sell it. But it doesn't necessarily include all the other things that your agent should be working with you and advising you and helping you get the house ready for selling. And a lot of times the marketing for the property may be very dependent on repairs and or pre-sale disclosures and reports and certain other things done to help, you know, promote the value and quality and condition of the property, right? So this is just Carr asking the listing agent, did you do all this stuff? And here's your checklist, right? So let's hop back into it. So again, hopefully during this process, we also found out if you were in a common interest development or a plan unit subdivision, and did we get copies of the articles of incorporation and bylaws, the CC&Rs, the current financial statements. Again, those are usually handled through title, but hopefully you were explained that you're probably going to have to pay an expedited fee for that information. And we don't want to do it until we're in contract because the payoffs and some of the fees or whether your account is current will have to be pulled again if we go into another month. And so there's just, again, you know, hopefully you have disclosed to the agent that it's in an HOA and what the fees are. If it's a new subdivision, you should be, as a seller, and again, with new construction, this doesn't apply, but if I'm an agent representing somebody in a new construction, I should make sure that my buyer has a copy of the public report or has been delivered to it, and that the seller is giving them a new construction disclosure. It's usually on their forms. There's a whole twist to if property is bought from a builder. won't make it the scope of this video, but I probably will do a video on if you're buying new property, what the role of your agent is. We're a consultant at that point. There's a lot of forms that we can review and look at, but again, they're not typical forms, and our expertise with the builder, unless we've done, 5 or 6 homes with, the same subdivision, our value is possibly not as much as you would like it to be. So we keep rolling here. Then because we're now at the point where we've received a contract, and again, this is a catch-all. This isn't talking about how to negotiate or all the steps involved in showings and managing offers or any of this. This is just the paperwork. This form, this checklist, is really just the paperwork involved, the forms to sell a house. And California basically work closely with attorneys so that agents don't get sued for practicing law. We have essentially, destroyed trees until DocuSign and electronic signatures. And these are just the forms, right? So I'm just talking about the forms. I'm not even talking about the real job. I'm just talking about the paper. This is the paperwork, okay? So here we go. We're still rolling along. So it's assuming there's a residential purchase contract and any applicable addenda. Have you got it all, from the contingency to the sale of a buyer's property, to a seller's purchase of replacement property, to an interim occupancy agreement if that's part of it. The buyer wants to possess the house prior to the close of escrow. The seller in possession addendum. You may be staying after the close of escrow, and are you going to reimburse? A form for that. The seller in possession after the close of escrow. All the counter offers and any other addendum, and are they signed and initialed by all parties? Even electronic signature doesn't auto-populate every place to sign and every place to initial. So then we get into some of the things of the pieces of the contract in this section of this checklist, and that is, where's the good faith deposits? Basically, it's called an EMD, earnest money deposit, and do you have it, or is it going to escrow? And then you're supposed to deliver all the forms of a ratified contract that has all the signatures and everything to escrow. And then you should also make sure that the buyer's agent has the same information or the same copies, and so they can forward it to the lender. And you should be essentially give the buyer the completed TDS disclosure form. Well, you got to give them all the disclosures because you're under a timeline in the contingency to do that, right? So you now need to deliver all the disclosures, and then you need to give the buyer a combined hazards book and complete the lead-based paint if it's applicable. You need to give the property transaction booklets and a disclosure related of the agency agreement, which is part of the contract now. Give the buyer the possible representation. That's basically in the purchase agreement bundle now. You need to report the sale to your broker, and you also need to update the listing status on the MLS as pending. We may not have, discussing the status of a house. That's probably another video about whether it should be pending or what the continued status should be if you have accepted a contingent offer. But you need to do that part. And then if there's a buyer increased deposit in the contract, you need to make sure that you have filled out the form for that. And then hopefully that you have obtained a buyer loan pre-qualification, and you delivered that to the seller, and you ordered the prelim and you delivered it to the buyer, and you basically ordered the structural pest inspection. That may or may not happen in today's contract, and there may not be a clearance negotiated in it, but it's asking you these questions because it's pretty standard in the contract, but things have changed a little bit. But these are just what CAR is asking you to do to stay in compliance. This is why you're paying that listing agent, is if anything, is to manage all the forms, all the information about selling your house. And we're almost done. Now there's going to be some other things in the contract where there's going to be buyer requests for repairs. Oh, you sold your house as is. You might see a buyer request for repairs, and hopefully your agent has told you that there's no such thing as an as-is sale. But again, don't want to go down that rat hole. But the car is asking, did you have any buyer requests for repairs? And did you deliver the report to the seller? Did you deliver the response to the buyer? Again, how those responses are delivered are called out in the contract. And, believe it or not, some of them are requiring, delivery to the buyer rather than the agent. So that's an important part in the contract. So if there's any subsequent repair on the property, meaning did you clear the pest? Did you deliver the report to the buyer? It's also asking, as you get closer to the close of escrow, about seller financing. If that was part of the contract, it's just bumping it, reminding you that there's a form for that called the SFA. And then it's having you perform and complete a notice to buyer to perform. Now, again, this is just what it's asking. There's actually several points where contingencies are released, and there are forms to release every contingency, from inspections, from appraisals, from loan, from everything, to accept everything. There's a whole bunch of stuff in contingencies, from receiving disclosures to making inspections and appraisals and loans if they apply. So there's a whole bunch of those. And then there's this thing called the notice to perform. And again, that'll be another video, because contracts, real estate contracts, are a little bit different than a commercial or most contracts you're familiar with. We really don't have a termination when buyers don't perform. We have a notice to perform. And that will be another video. But anyway, we also are talked about here, for your legal protection, document all telephone and personal conversations related to the transaction. And that's just a warning here that you need to do that, right? So let's sit there and say that we have somehow gotten to the end of the road with your house, and now we are headed towards close, and now we've sold your house, and we're stepping into the last phase, which is after the escrow has closed. What are the activities, right? Well, the simple part is there's a key delivery, there's the lockbox, and there's the move out. The move out is a lot of fun, depending on whether you have time after the close, or you have to move out before the close of escrow, or maybe the property was vacant and that's not an issue. But we have a bunch of activities after the house records. So we have to work through the possession piece, and then the possession piece triggers the keys delivered to the buyer. And then that triggers, usually after the close, we take the sign, and then the lockbox can or not be removed from the property. It depends whether the seller, is still on the property, or, we want the agent, the buyer's agent, is going to pick it up. We're going to report the details to the multiple listing service, and we're also, the sale reported to the broker manager. They know already when it closed. They're pretty much working very closely. So the last part I wanted to share with you is this form here, which is disclosure forms, contacts. These are basically some of the forms. This doesn't include all the disclosures and reports that were done with the house, right? So they're looking for the agency, all the advisories, any cancellations, the combined hazard sign off, the contract of sale if there was one, the purchase contract, the cooperating broker compensation, the earthquake guide, any estoppels if there was a tenant, the exclusive authorization and right to sell if there was that, the FERP does, the HUD inspection notice if it was a HUD sale, the industrial use zone location if it showed up on the NHD. So they want the NHD in there. All the stuff associated with that. The interim occupancy, if that was part of the agreement, the lead paint notice, if that applies, the local disclosures, if that's involved, the lockbox authorization, the Megan's Law stuff, if the language isn't on the purchase contract, the military ordinance location, which again shows up, any mold disclosure issues, natural hazard disclosure statement, the NHD, the pest control report if it was available, the SBQ, the TDS, the verification of property condition, the stuff relating to the smoke detector and the water heater. And then if it was in a condo or a subdivision, if it was in that, right, it's all this other stuff, right? All the stuff regarding to the subdivision, all that reports, is that provided? Is there, do you have all that? And again, this all has to be held for, for 3 years, right? So this is just the contractual piece that your listing agent and working with a buyer's agent has to do. So all this information that you give to the listing agent then has to be coordinated and delivered to the buyer, and the buyer has to sign it, and the buyer has to perform to the contract, which often has an inspection contingency in it and other contingencies if there's a loan or there's an appraisal. So there's a lot of paperwork involved, and that's what you're paying for, is you're paying for people to do the paperwork and to make sure that everybody has been given everything about the home that they're buying and that they have received it and they have acknowledged it and they have been given an opportunity to respond with any questions or concerns, and your agent has relayed all those questions and concerns and you have answered them. And that's the contract. That's a contract checklist. So we haven't even gotten into all the little things about preparing the house for sale, about the showings, about the negotiation, about the work that's going to happen after a contract's accepted, how we're going to keep the parties on time, on scale, how we're going to negotiate any issues and speed bumps. Haven't even talked about that part of the work. I've just shown you, and I'm looking here, the last 20 plus minutes have been about just the paperwork that's involved in selling your house. And so there's going to be another video basically breaking down all those other areas that aren't about the contract. And we're not even talking about the marketing. We're not talking about the showings. We're not talking about, like I said, this is just one part of the contract or one part of the sale of your house or selling your house. It's just the paperwork. So there's a lot of stuff involved and a lot of parts and a lot of information here that can become really problematic in a sale. It's really problematic in a sale if you have tenants and you don't know if they haven't been given a notice to vacate, or there's an assumption that they're going to, it hasn't been communicated that they'll be out by the close of escrow. It's problematic if a buyer doesn't know that you need replacement property, or you need this subject to a 1031 exchange, or there's information about the HOA assessments increasing and that information wasn't disclosed, or there's a structural issue with the condominiums that are going to be fixed and the buyer doesn't know that. There's a lot of other work that needs to be done. And so this relationship of the agent you're working for really needs to be a good relationship, and it really needs to be one that can deal with a lot of emotion and a lot of other challenges. Never mind that at a minimum, they need to get the paperwork right, and they need to do all the signatures and check boxes and initials need to be signed. This is a contract, right? So this is just the checklist. This doesn't even cover off all the other tasks and responsibilities and duties that real estate agents need to do. And the roles are different for a buyer's agent and a listing agent. And there's far more liability on the information passed from the seller to the buyer on the listing agent. And so you want to make sure that you have a very competent agent when it comes to the paperwork. You know, I don't know what to advise you if you picking somebody who is not process driven and has their paperwork under control, and you're not going to like getting 50 DocuSigns when you just sold all the paperwork for your house and it should have been done before that. So again, I hope this helps. I hope this puts it in context that this is just a small part of what real estate agents do. There's a lot of other moving parts and tasks and responsibilities. But as you can see, we've spent almost 30 minutes talking about paperwork. Never mind, the job is 3/4 of it is not about the paperwork. So thank you for staying with this video. If you're at this point, I would love to have you subscribe and follow along. This is just the first of many videos uh, about selling real estate and the roles of a buyer's agent and a listing agent. And hopefully you found it of some value. And I wish you all the best if you're selling or buying a home in 2023. Thank you and have a great day.